Hi, everyone. Welcome to Season 2 of Life on the Edge. In this first episode, I speak to Simon Townsend, who is IGEL's CMO, and we delve into the top EUC trends for 2022. It was really great to get Simon's insight into the upcoming trends for 2022, and I really hope you enjoy the episode. Thanks very much. Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the latest episode of Life on the Edge. We are now in Season 2. So to kick off Season 2, we have IGEL's own CMO, Simon Townsend. Hi, Simon.
Hey, how you doing, James? Thanks for having me.
More than welcome. So, Simon, do you want to just give a brief intro to yourself and your kind of background in the EUC? I know that's a long history.
I certainly can. It's probably coming up to or near on 20 years in end user compute. Prior to that, I did a lot of work in telephony, voice over IP and networking. I did a lot with some very early technology from Avaya and 3Com and Nortel back in the day when they were trying to put telephony over layer 2 and layer 3 technologies. Funnily enough, the 3Com one that went over layer 2 never really took off, but the Avaya one and the Cisco's one did. So that's another story. And then someone introduced me to this product called Citrix, and it was just around the time MetaFrame 1.8 had come out. I went and did a load of training courses. I was a pre-sales consultant at the time for a distributor. I did a lot of value add in terms of enabling partners, etc. Went through all of the training with XP, what was it? XPA, XPS, XPE, was that right? No,
yeah.
SA and E, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yes.
So went through all of that, actually worked for a short period of time for a gold Citrix partner, actually selling the technology before moving on to AppSense and spending about 15 years putting AppSense on top of some of the largest Citrix estates in the world, before about 3 years ago coming to IGEL and moving into a role that now looks after marketing. But the way I see it, James, is I've always been selling end user compute, and I've always been involved in Citrix or virtualized desktops in one way or another. And most people won't like me saying this, but I don't really think it matters whether you're a salesperson, an SE, or a marketing person. We're all still out there trying to sell the woes and the benefits, should I say, of what VDI and desktop as a service can do for an organization.
Absolutely. We're all in sales.
There you go. You agreed with it. Good. I'm pleased.
I do. Yeah. Okay. So we decided today we were talking and we said we would look at some of the key kind of trends that we see in EUC for 2022. And I thought the one we'd start off with first is probably one of the most divisive ones, is obviously remote working and return to the office and hybrid working, flexible working. There's so many terms for it now. So maybe just get you to give your view on it and also where you think it's going.
Yeah. I prefer the word hybrid out of all of them.
Yeah, I agree.
Hybrid or flexible, whatever you want to call it. Mm-hmm. I'm fortunate enough to be sat in one of the IGEL offices today in the UK. Personally, I've got 3 children at home of various different ages. I've spent enough time working at home for the last 2 years that I wanted to get back into the office. We've got people coming back into the office now on a semi-regular basis on a Tuesday and a Thursday. It's great to sit in front of a whiteboard and work through things, in my opinion, at a slightly faster pace than what we could do over Zoom. But obviously, work from home has provided us flexibility in life, right? And I think people have realized that is also important. And it is, stupid that all of us sort of get up at 6 o'clock every morning, get on a train that's overly crowded and go into London all at the same time, then come back again. But I also feel that, life does need a little bit of structure, and particularly some of the other services, for instance, and things that are out there like schooling and teaching and policing and nursing, etc. They rely on a little bit of structure, and I think sometimes we just need to be mindful of that. I think really what we're learning very quickly, though, is that, work isn't obviously somewhere you go, it's something you do. I think we've all heard that before, but I think it's just about
numerous times.
Numerous times. I think it really is about how do we empower someone to be productive regardless of where they are. Yeah. And there is no point having a situation where, when I go to work, I've got to use one device, one technology, and when I go home or when I work remotely, I need to use something else. And so I think we've seen all of that. You've seen the numbers, things like the number of Chromebooks has gone through the roof, the number of laptops and PCs that people are after has gone through the roof. Various organizations that we speak to at the moment are waiting months to try and get new laptops and mobile devices. Everybody wants to empower their employees with a mobile device because it gives them the ability to move from all those different locations and obviously access corporate data. So I think the real thing for us, particularly in 2022, to put a bit of an IGEL plug in here is demonstrating to people the value of putting a secure operating system like IGEL onto a mobile device that enables that hybrid working. And I think that's the future. I'm obviously in charge of marketing. We've got a number of events. Some of them I know that you're presenting at, booked. So it feels that people want to come back together again, as and when it's safe to do so. It's looking like it is becoming safer to do that. So, hopefully we can live in this hybrid world where, we don't always need to get on a plane or a train to do a meeting. We can continue to speak as we are now over technologies like Zoom, but we've got the ability at least. Let's not forget, how nice it is to actually get on a plane, read a book, go and meet a colleague, have a meeting in front of a whiteboard, socialize, have some dinner, and have that human interaction. I do think that's important.
I absolutely agree. And as you know, I put a video on LinkedIn about my views around this, and it was all about how, my views on remote work, and also the fact that, yes, I work remotely, but at the same time, I've got like 4 or 5 different things going on over the next couple of months per month to meet up with colleagues, to meet up with the community, all of these types of things, which I've missed. So, I think the flip side of what you're saying about people want to get back to the office, people who work remotely don't want to be in isolation either. So they do want to have those social interactions. And I think that's what we're seeing as well. So I think hybrid is the correct term for it. So
I got a quick question for you, James. How long have you been working for IGEL?
2 years at the end of this month.
Have we ever met?
No, we have not.
How tall are you?
I am 6'5".
Now, I had an idea that you were very tall. I think maybe I'd even seen a photo of you at one of the Irish Citrix user groups. But this is a classic example, right? It's like you work with these people and then you don't really know much about them. And some might argue that's a good thing. But I can tell you I've met 2 people that have joined IGEL recently that I hadn't met up until recently. And I was interested to see how tall those people were. And it was, Ben Ward, I think, has been on this podcast, right?
He was on the last one. Yeah.
There we go. Right.
Haven't met him either.
But Ben was significantly taller. I don't know why I had Ben at about 5'11", 6, and then sort of Ben turned up, and I was like, oh, you're a bit bigger than I thought. But anyway.
No, absolutely. I think you're making a valid point there about the whole thing about this thing, and as you said, and let's actually that's a good segue. Well done, Simon. To the whole thing which we've seen during the pandemic is kind of around onboarding, and also we've seen the rise of what we're now calling digital employee experience, which couple of years ago it was like, what are you talking about? There's no such thing. We measure, we use login VSI, we measure CPU, RAM, how applications are performing. End users, well, I know it's called end user computing, but as you know, it's always about the technology as opposed to the actual user. Whereas now, and users aren't accepting a bad user experience anymore, and that's why we've had this change with how companies and the metrics company use for how their environments are working. So, obviously, we've seen different platforms around DEX, but it's definitely taken off. We just alone this year, we've seen a lot more emphasis on DEX.
Yeah. I think it goes a little bit further than some of those platforms as well, right? So measuring the CPU and the memory, either at the endpoint or on, say, a host VM. And then I know that there's other ones now that are looking at, seen some very clever stuff from the likes of ControlUp, for instance, that are looking at, they can tell, is it because where you're sat in relation to your Wi-Fi router? Other technologies like the Liquidwares, the Lakesides, for instance, the login BSIs that can do some very cool stuff around round trip times and where that delay might be. But I also think some of this comes down to just the native experience people need to receive from the device that they use on a daily basis. Battery life, for instance, comes to mind as the first thing, right? If I give you a laptop with a battery life of 1.5 hours, or I give you a laptop with one of 7, which one are you going to choose? And it's because one of them gives you a better experience, that you're not hunting around looking in your bag for a cable every 5 minutes, particularly in a hybrid world. And
we also know the battery status generally is inaccurate, and it's not an hour and a half. It could be,
No, and I think actually what's happening, and I see this bringing up a young family, is that many of the things that we've grown up with and become, I'm going to say used to, or at least accept, is not going to be acceptable with the newer generations, right? These mobile phones and iPads, their battery life, the way they work, the way we unlock them, the way that we authenticate, the way that we install applications, delete applications, it's completely changed things. And you turn around to my son, who's 13 years of age, you turn around to my daughters, who are 7 and 4, and you ask them what Control-Alt-Delete is, and they're like, what's that all about? And my son still has a problem today trying to work out why he's got to be careful about what goes into something called add remove programs inside of Windows, for instance. I mean, things are fundamentally changing, not just in terms of measuring performance, but also just the overall experience that we get, arguably from the time we join a company to the time we leave.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree 100% with what you're saying. We've definitely seen a complete flip. And as you said, all of these kind of younger people coming into the industry, they want to be able to use their iPads and all that kind of stuff for access. And that's why we've seen the kind of rise of all this kind of DEX platforms. Yeah. And obviously, from our own point of view, quite a few of them are already integrated with our solution. So, it makes sense. So we've got DEX. Suppose, another big one is obviously the chip shortage is having it. And so the chip shortage, you've got sustainability and all that kind of thing kind of wrapped in together because of the, so obviously, we've seen, as you mentioned, Chromebook sales have gone through the roof, laptops, all of this kind of stuff. But at the moment, there's a massive backlog, and, given what's going on in the world at the moment, it's potentially going to get worse. So you've seen a lot, from our own perspective, looking at kind of how we can help with that, how you can utilize devices. So, in that we can, with utilizing IGEL, you can basically convert a device. It doesn't matter how old it is. Once it's, we've put quite a lot of information around this and the impact it has, and it's pretty sizable.
Yeah. No, agreed. So I think there's, as you said, there's a couple of things. I think anyone that is fortunate enough to be looking at trying to buy a new car at the moment will know that that's very difficult because of the chip shortages.
Yep.
And it even comes down to the smallest component on a car, right? You can go and buy a car today, brand new car, pick it up, and they'll say, "Oh, it doesn't come with a Wi-Fi charger in the armrest anymore," or it doesn't have the ability to automatically pop the headlight washers out, right? If you've ever had that on your car, all because of the chips. Sunroof, actually, the chip that controls sunroofs for a lot of the German cars is in short supply, and we do see that. I was talking to quite a large insurance company the other day. They were after some very well-known laptops that they were going to put IGEL on. They wanted 2,500 of them. They tried to order them in October and got told they'd have to wait until the new year. They've just been told, as I spoke to them last week, that that's now going to be pushed back until the end of April. So there are some delays in terms of getting hardware out to employees and organizations. But then also on the flip side of that, sadly, you've got other organizations, again, that we're now speaking to, who went out and decided that it was a great idea when COVID came along, that the best thing they could do would be, well, let's just buy 80,000 laptops. And with that comes a load of technical debt and a load of technical challenges. And what some of those organizations are seeing is that they've not actually been able to manage, configure, deploy, and provide ongoing management security to all of those laptops. So those laptops are either stocked pile high in an office somewhere, or they're out there in the field, and organizations are now having to worry strategically, what do they do about some of that technical debt that they've got? And all of this adds to an ever-increasing problem, which is that thing around e-waste and sustainability. And I read a very interesting and horrifying statistic recently, which was there is as much e-waste now in the world to cover the whole of Manhattan. We are getting rid of tens of tons and millions of tons of this on a yearly basis. And obviously that's not just, laptops, PCs, desktops and monitors and stuff, right? That includes everything that's electrical, fridges, freezers, cookers, etc. But
absolutely,
IT does have a very important part to play. And I think we definitely have seen, particularly in the UK and I, over the last 18 months, and you can see it on our website. If you go to our video resources library, you can see some recent case studies from the likes of Marcus Study and what we've done with GTech, what we've done with Standard Life, what we've done with various other architecture organizations and healthcare environments. Pennine Acute Trust would be another great example. All of them have repurposed their Windows laptops to then run IGEL OS. And it is not just saving 500,000, 1 million, 1.5 million in terms of having to buy net new hardware, but it's having a significant reduction on the impact on the planet. And in some cases, it's 60% in terms of a benefit, in terms of reducing their carbon footprint. It's like the equivalent of cutting car travel down by like 1.5 million kilometers, as an example. We've done some studies, and a typical 3,500 seat organization that chooses not to buy net new endpoints can actually bring their carbon footprint down by some pretty astonishing numbers, to be fair.
Yeah, I think we've seen a big kind of change around sustainability. I was just was actually looking at something online, and it was a financial report from a particular industry, and sustainability was one of their key goals going forward. And we're seeing more and more companies that is becoming part of their objectives, and we're seeing definitely in Europe, where I'm definitely seeing that more and more. And any of the companies we're talking to, they're all mentioning sustainability and that. So yeah, I suppose the aspect you mentioned, and look, we all know what needs to be done. We're all aware of the climate crisis, and whatever we can do. And if you look at the statistics around the amount of resources required to produce a single laptop, they're frightening. It's like 280,000 gallons of water for one single device. So whatever we can do. And as we've said, we've proven that you don't need a device can be repurposed. I've heard of one of our customers basically the hard disk died on their laptop. They stuck in a UD pocket, and that's another way you can sustain it. It doesn't have to be a full conversion; it can be a temporary conversion with our UD pocket. So basically, they stuck in a UD pocket into an AVD session. Didn't matter that there was no underlying hard disk. So it's just all these different use cases that you can. And it's said, we talked, you can do a full conversion or you can do the temporary conversion.
Yeah.
And that then facilitates, as you said, this whole thing around technical debt. All of these devices in the wild, or people using their home devices, which are all, and that kind of brings me on to another point is kind of security. Security is huge. We've seen the rise of cyber attacks. It's and then and you look at where they're occurring, and a lot of these are occurring on aging Windows estates, which are vulnerable to these kind of attacks. Now, as we both know, nothing is 100% protected against a cyber attack, but you can limit the attack surface and that kind of thing, and that's one of the things we can do. But yeah, I think security is definitely becoming bigger and bigger, and as you said, companies are now kind of they distributed all these devices, and then they're like, oh, okay, we need to manage them, we need to be able to monitor them and see, and that's I think that's kind of the phase we are of this whole digital transformation now.
Yeah, it's costly as well, and I think sometimes we forget the can I call it a soft cost? It probably isn't a soft cost, it's still probably a hard cost, but it's an employee cost in terms of time and effort. The first thing that happened when 3,000 devices went out of an office and went into 3,000 home offices, the tools and the network for many organizations just wasn't designed to cope with such distribution. So, you've all of a sudden, you've got everybody saying, oh, I think we're going to have to buy 3,000 VPN licenses. Why is that? Well, number one, it means they've got secure access into the data, but also we need that VPN link to be up so that we can remotely send out any patches and updates. It's like, okay, well, this is never going to work. It's going to be a horrible experience for the user, and it's also going to be an incredibly horrible experience for IT. And when you're in a world of having to do a patch and updates on a far more regular basis than ever before, not just for security, but for employee experience and updating things like Zoom and Teams and stuff, just the overall management and patching and security effort it takes to keep all of those 3,000 devices that are now remote. You need new tools to do it, but even with some of those new tools, they're not as automated perhaps and as easy as we feel. And I suppose I'm somewhat biased, but I look at it, I'm like, it's 2022, right? I don't worry, almost never worry about my phone. Never worry about it. It's like Apple come up with an update, I press the update button, the applications update themselves. I never have to worry about it. The biggest worry in my personal life is keeping my son's Windows 10 PC up to date and making sure it's protected. And if you're in IT and in end user computing, you've got to do that for 3,000, 10,000 remote devices. That it's a lot of effort. And I just think there must be better ways to do that. And ransomware isn't going anywhere. Malware is not going anywhere. I think the current crisis in the world is going to sort of like stir up a load of more conspiracy theories and worries around that. But the truth is that, organizations are subject to phishing attacks significantly easier because of remote workers. And hence ransomware and malware does get into organizations significantly easier. So, I mean, look, it's been a priority for IT for a long time. It continues to be a priority for IT, and you see that in the security industry all over.
Yeah, cool. So, just to change tack a bit, what do you feel in 2022 is kind of going to have the biggest impact on EUC?
That's a good question. I'd probably put automation into one of my first answers. There is no doubt about it. There are a number of automation technologies out there now, Automation Anywhere and Blue Prism and some of the others. They're definitely getting a lot of investment. They definitely seem to be sort of like an exciting area of IT at the moment. And I know in certain verticals, they are radically changing and replacing a number of manual tasks. But I don't necessarily see much of that technology being utilized in the EUC space at the moment. I think those that have been around EUC for a long time, you know, some of your viewers will know people like Guy Leach, who's very well known for his PowerShell scripting and his PowerShell skills. You've seen products like ControlUp really, you know, take things to the next level through their level of automation and their scripting tools. I think everybody just wants to, you know, setting up infrastructure in EUC, I think, is becoming easier. Automating that continues to be important. But I think linking together end user compute, IT service management and automation continues to be quite an exciting area. I think there's quite a lot that IT departments could offload or get rid of if they could solve that, either from a support point of view or a security point of view. So yeah, I think automation is quite interesting.
Okay.
And I think the other piece is probably going to be around that technical debt, which is how does an organization make use of what they've invested in the last couple of years to the best of its ability. And I don't want to make any wrong assumptions, but I think we probably can all appreciate that it was a bit of a panic when we suddenly had to send everybody home with 2 days notice. Everybody in IT achieved some amazing things. We sort of, you know, some people have said we went through 2 years worth of digital transformation in 2 weeks.
Yep.
I think what we were able to do is we were able to execute very quickly, but perhaps some of the decisions that were made, whilst they tactically worked, organizations are now standing back and saying, okay, how are we going to protect ourselves if this was to happen again or we had to go back into lockdown? How do we make the best of what we've invested in? What does our strategy look like moving forward? And I think that's interesting. I think that's driving some of the VDI DAS conversations that we see in EUC. I think it's also driving, very interestingly, a couple of conversations I've had over the last couple of weeks about the rise of web-based applications and the decline of Windows ones. And I think that, again, is going to be something to watch out for, not just this year, but as we go into the next 3 to 5 years. Because I think the application landscape is going to change, because that then suits a more hybrid way of working.
Yeah, I agree. No, I think you're right. We've definitely seen, you know, we've talked about it before, the whole thing around the decline of Windows apps. Not that they're going away. They're never going away. They're like cockroaches, never going away. So
correct. They are never going to go away.
No.
I tell you the last thing I will say, James.
Yep.
Unified communications is it has to be table stakes in 2022.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It doesn't matter whether you're deploying MacBooks, mobile phones, VDI, desktop as a service environments. Unified comms just needs to work. And it's interesting. I started this interview 20 years in end user compute, initially working with Citrix. I'll be honest with you, back then I was deploying Citrix for some very niche use cases. remote workers, single applications, going out to remote sites, for instance.
Yeah.
Even though I was selling and implementing a lot of Citrix, I wasn't using a lot of Citrix. I've got a Lenovo device here, one of these ThinkPad flippy things, right? And you'll see just in the corner of it there, I've got the old IGEL UD Pocket. This runs IGEL on a regular basis. I access a Azure virtual desktop. I've got all of my Office 365. I've got Teams. I've got Zoom. I've never been a user of a virtual desktop more so than I am now. And I tell you what it's all about. It's about the fact that the experience is just identical to, if not better at times, than what I would get from one of my other devices, say a MacBook or a Windows machine. And I don't think in my 20 years, I've ever been able to say that. I've always said, no, virtual desktop, no thanks, I'll take a full fat client. I quite happily will take a virtual desktop now, because as long as I've got access to Office 365, Teams and Zoom, and it works and it's quick, which it is, it's mobile, it's portable, and it works for me.
Yeah, and that kind of thing, that whole thing like that facilitates what we've spoken about, this whole hybrid working, because if you have this, you can be anywhere. You just need a broadband connection of some description, or even 4G or 5G now. Obviously, some places have 5G. Some places don't even have 3G. So it just depends on whereabouts you are. But we just do have this flexibility now to be able to, as you said, absolutely. I remember the kind of, someone would say back in the day, Citrix doesn't run as fast as my local PC. And it's like, it's never going to. But now it's like, these virtual desktop platforms absolutely can match what you've got. And your device is basically a way of connecting to them. That's it. You don't need to have all those applications running locally, and as you said, and we've seen, obviously, prior to this, it was all about Horizon and Citrix, and we've seen AVD, and AVD is obviously, it's been out nearly 2 years now, but it's still progressing and improving, and we're seeing the feature set increase. So yeah, I think you're right. As you said, I'd probably be in a similar amount of years in EUC to you, and the same experience. Like now, you could say a virtual desktop, absolutely, I'll take one. Yeah. So I think we have seen that evolution, but as I said, I think there's more to come. And it's all about the end user experience, and that has become paramount now. Whereas, it's always been called end user computing, but it wasn't always about the end user. I think that's a good place to stop. So thank you very much for your time, Simon. That was really appreciate that. It was great to get your views on this. And thanks very much.
No, thank you. Good to speak, and thanks for everyone listening.